Today at a special Rambling About Cars, a $300,000 Mustang, an electric 4-seat Lamborghini. Guys, I was gone for a week and the world went crazy. We also have Acura ZDX. We have Maserati MCXtrema. I love that name. Hopefully we're going to get some Audi R8 talk because we have a very special guest. So let's roll. It's podcast time. I am Christopher Smith. Mr. Chris Bruce is across the way. And we do have a very special guest. Very excited for this one.
It's me, Seth.
I thought you were going to debut him. I didn't know if I was going to debut him. Well, okay.
Bruce, you always debut the guests, man.
I know. We have Motor1.com Editor-In-Chief Seyth Miersma with us today. He just got back from Monterey Car Week. He spent several days there looking at cool cars, had some cool experiences with a car that's on its way out. Really looking forward to talking with that today and finding out what he did there, because there's so many events during Monterey Car Week as this overwhelming thing that I haven't actually got to speak with him about what you did there. So, yeah. Seth, go introduce yourself to the folks if they haven't seen you before.
Hey, everybody. Hey, Smith and Bruce. Great to see you guys. Great to see that Ted Green is rambling his life away. That's, I suppose if you're going to do it, that's the way to do it, right? No, I'm so happy to be on. I'm excited that you guys asked me to come on today. It was a whirlwind of a long weekend for me. Tons, as you say, tons and tons of debuts. Monterey Car Week, you guys know this better than anybody, right? Because you are manning the news desks at Motor One as much as anybody, and you can see there are just a crazy number of new car debuts, really important new variants, and then just the cool stuff that we expect to see at Monterey Car Week, meaning the Quail and Pebble Beach and the Rolex Motorsports reunion and things like that. Increasingly, this is like the new auto show. As automakers aren't going to auto shows anymore, they're kind of going to Pebble and the Quail and those places instead. So stoked to go through all the stuff.
It really has become that. I was noticing, because I was off last week and I wasn't paying as much of attention as I usually do, but you can't not when there's that much happening. It seemed like there were a few debuts we knew about, and then there were some more, and then there were some more. We're going to get into all that. I do want to say, hey, thanks, Bruce, and big thanks to Brett T. Evans, who came on the show last week, and you guys are a great dynamic duo. I'm just going to take like a bunch of other weeks off and go do stuff and enjoy listening to Rambling About Cars with Bruce and Brett, because that works pretty good to me, right? But no, you guys had a great show last week. Before we jump into everything, hey, Bruce, you were saying, I don't know where he went. Dude, I went to Illinois. It's not the biggest trip.
I still don't know where. I know you rented a car. I know you, your wife, and your parents went somewhere. And until literally this moment, I didn't know that Illinois was the answer to where you went.
We went to Illinois to visit family there that I am ashamed to say I've neglected for a very long time. One thing I learned over this last week off is I have not spent nearly enough time with family, both near and far. So to the family that's listening, I am going to be changing that. On the car front, my father-in-law was a big model builder, and sadly we lost him a few years ago. And we had talked a little bit, because he knows, obviously, I build a few models. I have a few behind me. There are many, many more on the other side of this wall. But over at my mother-in-law's house, there have been some models that, we were going to bring back here and take care of. Thought it was a couple boxes. I'm calling this the John Grant collection, because we uncovered 40 built models.
Okay.
And mind you, these are built models from like the 60s. As we were going, there were 3 huge boxes plus a box of built models. Turns out there were more built models in the boxes of unbuilt models. And these are things. He didn't just build models. I'm gonna do a quick share screen just to show you some of these things. We were getting a little emotional because even my wife was like, I had no idea he did stuff like this. Like custom cars, custom builds. This is, I just have them set up on like the top shelf of one of my display cases right now. 40 built models, 76 unbuilt models, all cars,
Wow.
a few sci-fi things, 4 boxes of just parts, one 1/25th scale classic 60s slot car. I mean,
okay.
as we were unwrapping these, and this is where it started to get a little emotional. The wrapping paper, this is all wrapped in newspaper. The newspaper is dated 1973. These have been wrapped up for 50 years. And he
did
built
a
these.
very good job. As a person, as you know, Smith, you and I both build models. He's doing a hell of a good job, especially when you consider the period of like the paint and the glue. Like that old glue would just like eat stuff apart.
And I mean,
it has a hell of a good job.
I mean, as we're looking here right now, I mean, this is one that he called the Trophy Taker Special, and he even had little trophies here that went with it. I mean, that's not decals; that's all hand painted by him on the sides. So it's yeah. Cool. I feel really bad that I didn't get to understand him a little bit better and know him a little bit better. So we have all of these kits. There's a truck here. That's a little record player inside the truck.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, this is all like this is all straight from the 60s and 70s. Mm-hmm. Just kit upon kit of not just put together, but like custom built stuff. He has one. I mean, there's one.
There's one sitting on.
There's one sitting behind me here. He wrote up a little card. This has to be from like the mid or late 60s. Called the Tiger, and it's like, okay, he must have been displaying these in shows, and nobody knew about any of this. So, cool. I mean, a little list of all the little custom stuff that just everybody ramblers out there, spend more time with your families. You're gonna find you're gonna learn. You'll learn so much that hopefully they're still around, and you could ask some questions and learn a little bit more. But that was kind of the crux of my adventure. I'm going to be taking care of these, and since we discovered these, actually, getting back with my brother-in-law to see what all he wants, because he wasn't aware of just the extent of this. So, yeah, Brian, wherever you're out there listening, stay safe, buddy. I'm gonna keep all of these things nice and safe until we get a chance to get back together and go through this all. But how about some real cars?
Yeah, we better talk about some real cars. Yeah, I gotta call out our buddy Groupa FBC, Seth. If you're not familiar, Groupa FBC is from Australia, and he listens every week. He's got a nice, funny comment, and then we'll get into the serious comment from someone who I believe is a first-time commenter, and that'll actually launch us into our first big topic of tonight. So, Groupa FBC, I'm outraged after Pebble Beach. My Bugatti Royale didn't win the concourse. I suspect there were cahoots amongst the judges. I have my people on it. So, I like
cahoots at Pebble Beach.
But I'm gonna say I shan't. I hope that is your preferred pronunciation of that, is saying, and this is going to lead into our first topic, because we're going to be talking about the Ford Mustang GTD, which debuted during Monterey Car Week. As Smith said, over 800 horsepower. We don't know how much over 800 horsepower yet, but they're saying over 800 horsepower, and a price tag starting around $300,000, and that's before all of the options that we know it has. And it has quite a few options. But iShant says Mustang GTD is very special and a great job by Ford, but it's too expensive and nowhere near going to be as good as a 911 GT3 RS Touring or a 911 ST or a Corvette Z06. I would say, since no one has driven it yet, we can't say that yet. That it's too soon to say for that.
Can I just say, and I haven't driven the GTD either. There's a really good chance that I may never drive the GTD, or none of us
anybody
would one. This is a really special car. It is a dedicated, not even track car. Like, this is an out and out race car. I know that it's street legal and all that, but with all due respect to iShant, the cars that he's naming, I mean, I can tell you, having done the first drive on a track of the most recently debuted 911 GT3 RS. We're talking about things that are in very different leagues here, right? Like, which is faster from around a circuit, I'm not sure, but essentially the 911 GT3 RS, which is sublime to drive and like absolutely one of the quickest cars that I've ever driven, no question, is still down what, at a minimum of 300 horsepower on this car. Like this is
correct.
The GTD is so exotic that to call it, for even to, and I don't mean this in a pejorative way, but for it to wear a Mustang badge, I think it's something that's really remarkable, right? Because the amount of work, the amount of engineering, the amount of sort of race engineering that has evidently gone into this car, I think is on a completely different level. And it's closer to things like the Ford GT, for instance, than it is to more of a series production car, like even a super special one, like the GT3 RS. So why don't we start there?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Sure. And let's tell folks exactly what makes this different, because I mean, Ford has done special Mustangs in the past. I mean, we know there was the not legal for street 93 Cobra R, not legal for street 95 Cobra R. There was the street legal but still pretty wild 2000 Cobra R. And this kind of goes completely beyond all of that, because it's not just an engine with a few minor changes to the suspension. Bruce, you wrote this up while I was out. Can you tell us a little bit about just how extensive this build is? Because it's kind of wild.
Well, I think something to point out is that we don't know everything yet, because I also wrote up a story. Our senior editor, Jeff Perez, he was at Monterey Car Week. He spoke to two of the engineers on the project, and there are certain things we just don't know yet. For example, we don't know how light the GTD can be if you order all of the lightweighting options. So you can get this with a fully carbon fiber front fascia and rear bumper. You can get this with magnesium wheels. You can get this with a whole slew of titanium parts on the inside. And all of those things are going to reduce the weight. So we don't know how little it can weigh. Also, we know it has a supercharged 5.2 liter V8. We know it makes over 800 horsepower. We don't know how much over 800 horsepower it is, because they didn't quite say this, but they kind of hinted at it. There's still some development going on in the background. This is a vehicle that doesn't begin. Production begins at the end of 2024. Deliveries begin in early 2025. So Ford still has some time to
long way to go.
Yeah, to kind of mess with some things in terms of what. So we have like these benchmarks and these kind of like bottom level points, but it can go more because development still seems to be a little bit ongoing. But yeah, supercharged 5.2 liter V8 making over 800 horsepower. Engine's rev line is over 7,500 RPM. So not only does it, supercharged engines, you don't usually think about being super revvy, or at least I don't, where 75 RPM from a 5.2 liter V8 is pretty healthy. And also, so it uses a transaxle now, which means they have moved the gearbox to the back, and there's a carbon fiber drive shaft connecting the engine to the rear mounted transaxle. That is an 8-speed dual clutch unit that's sending power to the back wheels, obviously. Just a lot of stuff. And then the other thing is that all the trunk, you're not carrying anything in this. There's a trunk, but there is no storage space in the trunk, because they have a cooling system for the transaxle back there. They have a push rod suspension system back there. And there's one other thing. Oh, the hydraulic control system is all back there. So that takes up the trunk.
and let's pause for a moment there, because I mean, that's significant. It's honestly, it's not that big of a deal to tweak the suspension, make it a little bit firmer, make some adjustments here, yank some sound deadening out, put in an engine with bigger horsepower. It's not that tough to do that. You're talking here about, okay, the transmission is now at the back. We've moved it to the back for better weight distribution. We have a completely new suspension setup, not like tweak springs. No, this is completely different. This isn't something that you just kind of do off the cuff. So
perfect time. If you're watching on YouTube right now, you can see the rear suspension setup and what it looks like and kind of what is in the back, because they provided these really cool technical images showing how things are set up. So sorry to interrupt, but it was perfect
No.
timing to talk about the suspension. So
Nope. And with those changes, Ford is saying they're shooting for near 50-50 weight distribution. How close that would be, we still don't know. They're also shooting for a sub 7-minute Nürburgring time. If you're a stickler on Nürburgring times, and I mean, I'm kind of on the fence on it. It's such a long track. There are so many areas and variables where you can bump your time up that isn't necessarily related to the car if you just have a really good drive. But in any case, going under 7 minutes at the ring, you need to have a pretty serious performance vehicle to do that. So, I mean, Ford is definitely shooting for some pretty lofty benchmarks here. But it is a $300,000 Mustang. I know people are going to be, in fact, I've already seen it in some of the forums that I'm on, some of the social media groups that I'm on. It's just like, even some of the Mustang guys are like, oh, this isn't a Mustang. I don't care about this car, which is kind of wild. But these are also the things.
That's as much, calling this not a Mustang is as much BS as calling the C8 Corvette not a Corvette.
Hey, they don't blame the messenger. I just happen to be the unfortunate guy that's in a lot of Mustang groups, right?
That's fine.
I think that Ford gets to say if it's a Mustang or not. Personally speaking, I think that the guys making the car do, and there's listen, to my mind, there's nothing about this. I think that comment is probably kind of silly, and I can see where people get to it, but like the definitions about what is and what is not a certain brand, I always find entertaining at the least. But we're still talking about front engine, rear wheel drive sports car, right? Like it still has the inherent capabilities and layout of a quote unquote normal Mustang. And Smith, as you pointed out, as we kind of started this conversation too, there have been lots of like racing Mustangs. There have been lots of actual race cars built out of Mustangs, and they still count too. So I don't know. The interesting part to me is that sub 7-second Nürburgring time, and getting back to the 911 comparison.
7 minutes.
7 minute, right? 7 seconds would be impossible. I think the GT3 RS, the new one, was around like 6 minutes and 50 seconds or something, like remarkably fast, right? Very, very quick. I have a lot of confidence, given 300 more horsepower, potentially lower curb weight. Active aero. This is fully active aero, front and rear, like with all of the subtlety that you get in those systems circa 2023. One that has been amazing cooling for the engine. And Bruce, to your point too, like this engine in and of itself, like the characteristics of it are kind of amazing, right? Because you've got the supercharging, you've got the grunt of a large displacement V8 engine, lots of torque. If you are, not that you necessarily would be in this car, but if you are in sort of the middle or lower part of the rev range, it'll still go. You can wind it out. The naturally aspirated version of this engine, which is if I'm not very much mistaken, the flat plane crank. I can't remember the name for this one. It's got an awesome nickname too.
Is this the Predator?
I think, right? Yeah, the Predator motor. This will do what, 8,000, over 8,000. So you're talking about like a massive supercharger on this thing too, and you can still wind it out. I just think it's going to be a monster. Like, and I haven't driven around the Nürburgring. So I'm not exactly sure what it takes. I can't just eyeball it and tell you that it's going to be this or that. But I can tell you that Ford and Multimatic know what the hell they're doing when it comes to building race cars, and they've borne that out. So I just think this thing is going to be spectacular. I think it's going to be amazing when it's underway, and almost certainly the fastest thing to ever wear a Mustang badge, unless there's like a land speed record car that I don't know about.
Well, and I mean, it's Shant has been pointing out, and rightfully so. I mean, this is a very special vehicle. Do we know, Bruce, how many Ford is going to make? Did they hint at that at all yet?
They have not. They have been very, very circumspect about that. They say it is going to be a limited number, but they are not saying how limited means. What they have said is that the purchasing process for this will be very similar to the Ford GT. And that means it will be by application only. You will have to, if someone wants to buy one of these, they will have to apply to buy it, and Ford will then accept that application, which it is interesting because that means you're not going to be seeing these like sitting on dealer lots with massive markups. in all likelihood,
Right.
because Ford is going to be selecting the people that are going to buy them, and then send, they'll go to a dealer and they'll complete the process there. But I at least with the GT, I never heard with the GT. We always heard about the issue where you had to agree to keep it. Was it for a year or for 3 years? And there were people that were trying to.
I think it was 1 year right off the bat. And then some people still kind of. Yeah.
But we never really heard about markups, because that it was a by application process. You applied to buy it, and a Ford deemed you worthy somehow, then you got it. And it's going to be a similar process for this car. So
and even without the markups, and again, now I'm just in a fight, and I don't actually mean fight. I really appreciate you commenting, and I think that you're invested in this. But let me also say this. Again, 911 GT3 RS starts at $250,000, and it's a series production car before you do anything to it. Now, we have no idea. Again, we don't know exactly what the pricing is going to look like overall on this car. It starts at $300,000. We don't know what that's going to mean. But we're talking about a hand-built, non-series production car, right? That has, at least on paper, specs that rival. And again, we're leaving out, like, Corvette Z06 is another great example. That's probably maybe even a better one in terms of the bang for your buck on that supercar level. There are any number of cars that would be really interesting around a racetrack that I think could be in this zone. This thing is just so extreme, especially wearing a Mustang badge, that I think it raises everybody's level of attention and excitement. So,
and consider what we're going to be talking about later, which, spoiler alert, prolific electrification. Here comes Ford into 2025 with a Mustang that's like the most wild, no electricity involved Mustang they've ever built, while Dodge is bowing out the Hemi, while Chevrolet is moving more towards electrification, obviously with the Corvette E-Ray. The so-called Zora is believed to be an electrified version with the twin turbo V8. So I mean, it's 2024, 2025, and Ford is still playing with big V8s. Let's go for it, right?
So I want to call out just a few things. We know very little about the interior of this car. Ford did not release any images. They did say it'll have a mix of suede, leather, and carbon fiber. But Smith, I think you will geek out about this like I did. So in Ford's press release, they said it would come from retired Lockheed Martin F-22 titanium parts. So I reached out to Ford about this, and I asked them, and I was told some components of the F-22 are made from titanium, but they are wear components. So after their useful lifetime, those pieces are retired, and then the Ford's material supplier grinds them down into little pieces, and then that powder is reused to 3D print the stuff that is inside this optional package for the GTD. So you get basically the ultimate fighter plane parts inside your Mustang, which is pretty damn cool in my opinion.
Now,
if they were nothing, it has no like functional aspect, but damn,
if they were recycling parts, if they recycle parts from a P51 Mustang, I would be on board. F-22.
Did they do a P51?
What's that?
Wasn't there a P51 Mustang years ago? I think that one also debuted at
like one of. Oh, you mean like a Mustang, like a Ford called P51?
They did.
Roush did one.
Yeah.
Oh,
yep.
Roush did one. Yeah. I mean, you got to play into the name. It's cool. I'm a fan. I caught that F-22 reference as well, Bruce. Good job tracking down a little bit more info. It's kind of interesting. I mean, it's probably a little gimmicky too, but hey, if you got it,
gimmicky,
but if you got it, use it, right?
Exactly. So we've referenced iShant's comments about this. He seems to be on the negative side, and that's okay because everyone is entitled to their opinions. He wishes that it were truly mid-engine like the Corvette, but we're talking about $300,000 of the price. It'll be cross-shopped against the 911 GT3 and Z06, maybe, but this is going to be so limited production that So I didn't include this, but Jeff, in his interview with some Ford folks, someone interjects and basically into his interview, someone is walking by because he's at the Quail and basically asks, "How do I get one?" And is completely serious. And
oh yeah,
you would know the folks at the Quail they've got some deep pockets, and this guy's
300 grand. That's like
up.
That's like you and I buying a $2,200 beater, man. That's
Right. Like this guy was ready to like cash on the barrel head, would have driven home in it, I think, regardless of the number they told him. So they're gonna have zero problem selling these.
So I'll put this in context that nobody's going to care about except for maybe you, Bruce. When I was at the Quail, one of the things that I kind of mentioned, I was talking to a friend of mine who was also really into watches, right? And the funny thing is, so there's Rolex sells a watch that you guys probably know of called the Daytona. It's their chronograph. It's got a lot of racing history. Paul Newman wore one. It's a big deal. They're very hard to get. If you walked into a Rolex dealer right now and asked them to sell you a Daytona, they would say no, because they don't have one, or they won't sell it to you at retail price. It's a little bit like this car. You expect a huge markup. So when you're buying one, it costs anywhere between, I don't know, $25,000 to hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on which one particularly you have, right? I saw more Daytonas on the wrist of dudes at the Quail than you're used to seeing like G-Shocks at a car show on the weekend, like around the corner, right? Like the prevalence of a white dial ceramic bezel Daytona was amazing in the spot. So like, yeah, these guys all have cash. The people that are there bring their own cars. They're doing other events during the weekend. They're, some of them are racing again at Monterey. Some of them are showing cars at Pebble. The Quail is awesome because you get to see all the new stuff and the brands are all there. So it's a really fun place to go. And for the brands, that really is why they're there. Whether they're they're not selling cars on the spot, but they're doing, kind of business development. They're meeting people. They're, getting contacts, meeting new people who have a lot of money and want to buy their cars, and that they're leading to sales that will happen down the road, probably in very short order. So I'm sure if Ford wanted to, they could have sold whatever the entire allocation of the GTD will be at the Quail in a day. That's one of the reasons why the questions about price too is a little ridiculous. It's something that we talk about a lot. You guys hear me say it all the time. Price matters more than anything else, basically, to your average car consumer. Your average car consumer is not going to buy a Mustang GTD, right? One, because it's so expensive, and two, because they're going to be so rare. So the price is almost an abstract concept at this point, because they will sell every one that they make unquestionably. And if Ishant or any one of our commenters had $300,000 and the opportunity to buy a GTD, they would be foolish to say no, to be honest, simply because you can sell it for a lot more once you own one. So do you know how many SVOs I could buy for the price of one GTD? You know how many Mustang 2s I could buy? Yeah. I could buy every single Mustang 2 still in existence. That's fair.
All like 9 of them that haven't rusted away yet. Well, speaking of price, gentlemen, how about we move over to what do you guys want to talk about next here? Do we want to talk about do you want to jump over to Maserati, Seth? I mean, you're kind of on a roll here with Monterey, and obviously we've talked about the MCXtrema, and I love the name. I cannot get the image of MC Hammer doing the typewriter out of my vision every time I say it. It's like, Maserati, you can't touch this. Boom. Oh. But I mean, we knew the stats, but the car finally officially launched during Monterey Car Week. But Seth, you had opportunity to kind of speak with Maserati, didn't you?
Yeah, so I went and did an interview with Klaus. Bruce, you told me I said Bussa. I can't say his last name. I got close enough. Who's the designer of the car, and I don't actually know if he's the head of design at Maserati right now or not, but I believe that he is. If not, he's near the top. Great guy. I've met him multiple times before. He has been at other Stellantis brands that stops along his career, and I've spoken with him, at length at different times. And so we did 20 minutes, like showing me around the car and doing a little bit of a walk around and talking through some of the elements, mostly again, the design of the car that he kind of put together, that his team put together for him. And I will say honestly, and we were sort of starting by showing, I think, some of those very studio photos of the thing, right? They put out photo sets of this in like really dramatic light to kind of show off the crazy angles and things like that. In person, it just really hits differently, or it did for me, anyways. I kind of thought, to be frank, like it was kind of ugly and a little bit of a joke. Like I thought a joke. I thought it was going to be a really cool car, and certainly a fast car. We're essentially talking about sort of the same thing as the GTD, right? This is a this is a full-on race car concept, at least that Maserati is putting together. Insane performance, like super lightweight, and so extreme that it's they put it in the name, right? But the level of detail and the level of kind of really interesting, thoughtful design that has gone into the car as you go around and look closely, I think blew me away a little bit, right? So you can look at sort of the central wing, which reflects the design of a lot of IMSA cars and Le Mans cars, prototype racers, basically. That comes off the center kind of central cockpit area. It's got a really nice sort of lighting detail on the top. The entire thing is like far subtler, I guess, in person than I expected it to be, especially for a car that's called Extrema. They're really neat, like, challenges. I think that the thing that Klaus was kind of hammering home for me as he was drawing this sketch was that the car sort of started, and we're all suckers for this, right? We're suckers for the I drew this on the back of a napkin story for famous cars. But I think what he was saying is they really did. They were sitting down, sort of having a conversation about this project, he and his team, and some of the engineering team. And they really started with, you can see it a little bit now. We've got a video of it kind of going fast motion, essentially two lines, like a belt line and a cross line. And his goal was to try and keep that, the sort of sanctity of that line in place, like as he designed around the car. And I think one of the neat things that I found, like one of the coolest part of the story is, if you see the car itself has a kind of cowl that comes across the midline. That is for aero, I think. I assume it's got an aero effect channeling the airflow back over that huge wing, and probably doing some cooling of the brakes and stuff like that. They'd gotten pretty far along on this design when they realized, oh, there's no room for a fuel filler, right? Like the place where the fuel filler would need to go on the mid-engine on a mid-engine car was entirely covered by this sort of arc of a aero element on the top of the car. And this was Klaus, I guess, kind of illustrating the handshake between Maserati design and engineering, especially on a project like that. Whereas he said, in other roles at other places, the engineers would have essentially said, you got to go back to the drawing board, you've got to move this forward or back, or find us some space, right? Instead, the response was, well, what if we make it pop open? Right? So there's a little button where that beautiful arc, just like it's hinged, and you can't really see it until you're looking at it, but there's a button you depress and it opens up, and sure enough, a beautifully designed fuel filler is right underneath it, right? Like, so stuff like that, I guess, like you guys probably feel the same way about a lot of this. Those details, whether you can appreciate or ever drive or do anything with a vehicle like this, those little details in those stories, I think, really humanize it for me and just make me more excited about the possibilities of what those teams are able to do, especially when they get down the line to cars that we can actually drive and that a lot more people can afford. You know what I mean?
No, I hear you. And I mean, obviously I'm not on an engineering team anywhere because I couldn't engineer myself out of a just a regular tent. But just from talking from friends of mine that are, and from talking with designers, I sometimes get the impression that the teams are working together, but there's a little bit of headbutting going on where, okay, well, here's my design and you need to accommodate that. And then the other side says, well, no, here's my design, you need to accommodate that. And it sounds like Maserati says, with what you're talking about, they're just like, let's just meet right here in the middle where we're all going to work together and be awesome. And I very much like that. And I really want to see this in person now, because maybe I'm just a little tired of just the over design that I feel like we've been getting from automakers over the last 10 years or so at least. Subtler sounds really good to me right now. Subtler sounds really good. And when you say that, as we're looking at these images of the MCXtrema with its big wing, and you think, is it really subtle? But you really have me curious now. I want to see one of these in person.
I think one thing you have to do is kind of close your eyes and imagine that it's not dressed up like a race car, right? And to be clear, like this is a track car, so like it's appropriate. But
it's got a number on the door, so.
Right. When you strip away the number, Maserati loves to do giant tridents and they've got giant Maseratian script on the central, I don't even know what you call that thing. It's sort of like a wing, the central blade that runs across the spine.
I always call it a fin personally, but yeah.
Sure. Yeah. You're probably right, Bruce. The central fin, and just look at the shape overall. And again, especially when you're talking about sort of the purity of the design, I think then you see it a little bit more. The detailing is really cool. The hard points of the detailing. We just saw on the rear of it, another thing that he pointed out, which is not super, super obvious, that there's a 3-part lighting cluster on the rear end that was sort of is very sort of subtly meant to evoke the Maserati Trident, but not in a cartoonish way at all. There is sort of the grill in between. You see this in the front, like on the hood that butts up against the part of the hood that creates cooling and butts up against the windshield, and in those grates between the lighting elements. They're really like awesome little like kind of Maserati again, like logo, not logos, but there's a design element there that's repeated over and over again. So some of that detailing, in addition to the overall shape, are done really deftly, and I think with a subtlety that you don't really expect. But you do have to pull back that, the fact that it's still got a lot of bling to it in terms of the way that it's painted or wrapped or decorated, essentially.
Well, and just to remind everybody, go ahead, Bruce, before I move.
I was just going to say, I have to say, you have made me far more interested in this car, both from the video that you had of the designer sketching it out, and then also your discussion of it, than I was before this conversation.
Agree.
Because to me, it seemed very much like an MC20 track car. Like I had reduced it down to that in my head, that it's just Maserati. They have their MC20. They saw a market for, a track version of it. There are some rich folks out there who will buy one. We'll sell it to them. Here you go. But from what you're saying and from what you're describing and kind of the details that you're providing, it seems like it's way more thoughtful than just that type of thing.
I mean, it's an MC20 at base, right? That's what they're starting from. That is the heart of the car. That's the architecture that they're building on. Those are the hard points that they had to work with, right? And again, when I'm sitting with Klaus and he's discussing, they know, right? We're starting with this kind of base chassis and powertrain layout and things like that. But Smith, you brought up the point about, sort of the conversation that happens between engineering and design. And I would throw in there too, the production has to come in there as well, right? You need to figure out, like, will it look good? Can you, will it go down the road, and can you build it? And all those things have to happen together. Mm-hmm. What's cool is when you see something like this. And again, it's a little bit like the conversation we had with the GTD, where it's like, we're going to build 62 of these. They're all sold, right? There's no real commercial benefit. I mean, I'm sure they're going to make money on it, but it's not like a huge commercial enterprise. What they're doing is trying to say something about where Maserati is going as a brand and where Maserati performance is at today. And I think that when you get into that conversation, especially with the guy who kind of drew the lines on it, it gets really interesting, right? Mm-hmm. So now, Bruce, to be fair, I could probably get interested in that conversation with a designer about any car, even one that I don't like, because I think the process is really fascinating. But yeah, I do. I came away with the same idea that you just sort of gave voice to, that I didn't think that I was going to be that interested in this car, and I ended up I walked away being quite interested in it and kind of wanting to see it in real space on the track and things like that. So.
Well, and others are certainly interested as well, because Maserati, as we've said before, they are building 62. Each one is already sold. We weren't told a specific price, but Maserati did say that the selling price was 7 figures. So Another expensive track only car, but Seth, like you said, the customers are at the Quail. They're at Pebble. They're in Monterey Car Week. Take it to them. I mean, take it to your customer. And
so real quick,
Very cool.
just for anyone, I know some of our listeners might not necessarily look at every story that's on Motor One. How dare you? But I just want to go over specs real quick. So this uses the twin turbo 3-liter Nettuno V6 that is also in the MC20, but this one has different turbochargers, and that boosts the output to 730 horsepower at 7,500 RPM and 538 pound-feet of torque. It has a 6-speed sequential gearbox, and 4-wheel double wishbone suspension with 4-way adjustable dampers. So when you're on the track, you can make this thing fit whatever track you're taking it to. So those are the kind of the highlight specs for anyone out there who's curious.
Very good stuff. And yes, you should be going to motor1.com to get your daily dose of automotive news every single day. And you can also catch Rambling About Cars and the Motor One Happy Hour at Motor One on YouTube. You can catch them Motor One.com Facebook, Motor One.com Twitter. For the audio fans out there, Rambling About Cars, we are still on audio. Audio goes up every Friday on Spotify, Apple, Deezer, iHeartRadio. We got to do Deezer. It is tradition now. There's like a dozen different platforms that we're on. That goes up every Friday morning. We love having everybody there. Guys, before we move on to a few more cars, Bruce, did you notice that we did get an email last week?
I don't think I saw that. I might have deleted it.
We do appreciate all the emails that come in. Bruce, I know you saw it last week.
Not Bruce, apparently.
I've got it here. The email, podcast@motor1.com. You can email us anytime. We'd love to get the emails. Tell us about your projects. Tell us about what you have going on in the automotive community. Tell us about what you think of the crazy stuff that we're talking about here. But you can always email us, podcast@motor1.com. And Lee, it's been a while since we've heard from Lee, but
you're right. I did see this. You're good call.
Yeah, see?
I've got this one.
Yeah,
I did.
We're happy. We're happy to have it. Before we jump into our next section of cars here, I just want to go over this email here. Catching up from Louisiana, Lee. Thanks much for the email, dear Chris and Chris. I usually catch up with a podcast early in the mornings when I'm out running or something. So a special thanks to Mr. Bruce, who added a good morning to the show a little while ago. Well done, Bruce. Good. I know I'm not in Australia, though that sounds better than 105-degree Louisiana right now, but appreciate it. A few things to run by you. Now, this is in reference to a podcast from a few weeks ago where a friend of mine was asking advice for a first car for his teenage son. And shame on you, Bruce, for saying he should get the Mercury Grand Marquis because it's got a fairly sizable back seat. Shame on you, Bruce.
By that.
But
stand by that.
So does Lee. You had a set of 3 cars from South Dakota, I think, up for discussion on which would be the best starter car for a newer driver. Go with the Grand Marquis. One of the things that makes this desirable is that it's part swappable with the Police Interceptor Crown Vics. So grab the stiffer sway bar, some extra front end coolers and fans, probably a quick ratio steering gear, and roll. I've got an old Roadmaster in the garage. The steering gear swap from a Caprice police package really helps. I've also been working on bringing an old 454 Suburban to life, so I like to run a list of general repair tips by you just to help anyone who likes to wrench on their own vehicles. This isn't necessarily specific to 454s, but
no, this is very good general information.
Just very good general advice. If you like to wrench on your cars, I like to wrench on my own cars. Lately, I find I spend more time looking for my wrenches as opposed to actually using them. But for those that want to do the work, here are some suggestions from Lee. Schedule only the most aggressive, terrible fixes for really bad and inclement weather. 100+ degrees preferred. In winter months, I recommend working with wind chills in the 5-degree Fahrenheit or below range. I'm not sure if that's the best advice, but...
Are we working outside, Lee?
Make sure fuel tanks are full. Make sure they're full before replacing a fuel pump. Yeah. Be prepared to say, what the hell were they thinking about 30 times an hour as you try to disassemble things. repeat on reassembly. I've worked on a few Fords over the years, and yeah. Plan to buy several new specialty tools you'll never need again. I have some specialty headlight adjusters that only work on, you guessed it, Fords in my toolbox. I'm with you. But go ahead and lie to yourself about how useful they will be in the future. Also plan to misplace at least one of them for when you actually do need it. Digital show of hands for all the ramblers listening right now. How many of you have had to go out to the parts store to buy a 10 millimeter socket? Yep, I see all of those hands. I can't actually see them, but I know they're up in the air. Have an assortment of glues or plastic zip ties available for the hundreds of broken tabs you'll create. I'm ashamed to say.
I think that one is legit useful. That one doesn't feel like a joke to me, or maybe that's just how I am. Maybe that says more about me.
The second Ford Taurus show that I owned had the cable shifter and the bushing wore out on it. 2 zip ties held that little bastard in place for like a year and a half. I'm not even gonna try to hide that. That was brilliant engineering on my part. Have a few episodes from the Motor One crew available to listen to. This is the best advice of all. Seriously, I always enjoy it while working on the cars. And then one last thing. Finally, I know Mazda killed the MX-30 in the United States, which I don't think anyone really noticed, but isn't it a little sad we won't have a rotary back in the market, even a strange range extender one like it was going to have? Of course, Lee is talking about the MX-30, I'm trying to go in from memory here, RE
Wait,
something.
maybe it's not REX. No, I think I'm thinking of the i3.
It's the MX-30 that's available in certain markets across the pond where you get the rotary engine range extender. Obviously, it's not going to be over here anymore. But Lee, thank you very much for sending in the email. Thank you for the awesome wrenching tips. Working on a car in a parking lot when it's 5 degrees outside is something that everybody has to experience at least once, preferably only once. So
RED
again,
is the
well, you won't have
yes,
any
there we
fingers.
go.
If you once you work in a parking lot at sub-zero temperatures one time, you're going to lose at least one finger above the knuckle, the first knuckle. No question.
If the car runs, let it run for like 5 minutes before. That way the exhaust is nice and hot.
Super hot.
You can go from burn to frostbite. But yeah, podcastermotor1.com. Thanks much for that email, Lee. And if you have any tips, any advice, send them over.
I think Group of FBC he and I must have worked on stuff in the past because we have the same experience here. Wrenching tip, always ensure to grind off those troublesome pointy bits on a nut or bolt head with a wrongly sized socket. Rounded heads work better. Been there, done that.
Sold the car because of it. All right, gentlemen, we've got a couple more cars to talk about here. We've got
Lamborghini next or Acura next.
Let's go with Lamborghini because electric 4-seat Lamborghini. Why not? This is the Lamborghini Lanzador. Am I saying that right?
I believe you are.
But more importantly, 1 megawatt of power. An entire megawatt. Did anybody know how many horsepower that translated to before the Lanzador debuted? I didn't, but
well, I wrote about 1,000 kilowatts is a megawatt, right?
Yeah. Don't spit metric numbers at me, Smith. we already heard 10 millimeters, and I don't need you. I don't need your nose that high.
Okay. I'm sorry, Seth. Let's see a raise of hands. That's 7/16 is about there, maybe. I don't know.
But real quick, I want to say Brett and I gushed about how excited we were for this car last week on the show because we saw the latest teaser and it looked so great in the teasers. And then Brett got the embargo information like 2 days later after
Let me guess.
The show.
You heard trumpets in the background.
Oh yeah. I'm so disappointed by how this thing looks.
What?
It's not so bad.
Why?
It's like a chopped Urus with 2 doors.
Oh my god! Yeah. I think it looks fantastic. I think it looks really, really good. I was just shocked. And granted, I was seeing it up on the show stand and so always in sort of a weird position, but this thing is huge. It is gigantic. Not nearly as low and every bit as wide as it looks in these photos too. But I think this thing is rad. I mean, honestly, I think it's very, very cool. Good detailing, cool body lines, like kind of doing all of the Lamborghini party tricks from a styling perspective, but amping it up to 11 in every place. Maybe the wheels are a smidge too big. I think they're like 24-inch wheels or something like that, which is a lot.
That's fine, because we have 4 years to get it all figured out, because this is the Lanzador concept. This is just a concept at this point. Lamborghini does say they're going to build it. This will be their first fully electric vehicle, but it's not slated to go on sale until 2028. So there's still several years to get this dialed in, and what's going to happen in that time, we don't know. We can tell you right now, Lamborghini says 1,341 horsepower from 2 electric motors, so it'll be all-wheel drive, obviously. What else we got here? It's a 2+2, so you've got seats in the front, you got seats in the back. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a 2-door vehicle, right? I mean, I was looking closer at the photos, and I didn't see anything on the back, but there's a lot of space behind that front door.
Yeah, I think it's 2+2. So full disclosure, I did not. There was a giant line, and Jeff had already done the media that we were going to create. Plus, you guys obviously had the embargoed assets on this, so I didn't get kind of inside the rope, the velvet rope, to get close, which we were able to do. They obviously weren't letting people, or at least I didn't see anybody going inside of it. But I did not see any sort of hidden doors, any hidden handles, or things like that. So I think we are looking at whether or not that'll legit for production.
Yeah, legit 2+2. Okay.
Yep.
And I mean, the photos we see,
FTC agrees with me.
It's pretty plain and undramatic. It is a little understated, I think. But again, we're looking at a concept, so there's still room for it to get a little more wild or a little more tame. We'll have to see.
What are you guys looking at?
He said undramatic, not understated. To be fair,
no, Smith just said undramatic.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
I said there's time for it to get a little more undramatic. There's time for it to get a little more wild. And then our old friend Brandon Turkis. Oh man, did I miss the Mustang GTD chat?
You did. We led the show.
You did, buddy.
Yeah,
you did, buddy.
Was our lead off. We spent like
20
minutes.
Scroll back in the comments and see how we're anxious to hear your rebuttal. By the way, Brandon Turkis, until very recently, Motor One managing editor, and now a turncoat working for the PR department at Ford. So we can't trust him. Obviously, he's a suit now. But no, we were.
Ouch. That didn't take long.
A lot of. He's dead to us, Chris. He's dead to us. No, there's a lot of conversation about GTD and cars like the new Z06 and the 911 GT3 RS. So I know, brutal. All right, Lamborghini. Sorry to derail us there. I apologize.
Hey, no, we don't derail here. We ramble, and it's perfectly legit. It's perfectly legit. Lamborghini says, I mean, this is like 4 inches lower than a Urus. So, I mean, it's not quite full on SUV, but it definitely has a crossover vibe to me, at least. In the photos.
It's very cross.
I love Lamborghini's terminology here. I'm going to try not to and everybody that listens to the show knows I can't pronounce crap. So it's always fun when I try. And Aerodynamica Lamborghini Attiva system. It's active aero.
Yeah. That's on the what? Is it the Huracan STO?
They use it on there too. I think it's the first time I've seen that terminology, so maybe I haven't looked closely at some of the other Lambo models. But I mean, it's got active aero front. It's got movable front splitters, extending diffuser, sideways blades. It'll have active suspension. So I mean, it's going to move around or do all sorts of things to make it try to go both faster when it needs to, and because it's an EV, be more efficient slicing through the air. Lamborghini doesn't have any estimates as far as range or things like that. We're still,
details. We don't.
Yeah, we're still 5 years out. So there's a lot of time to dial things in, but it's a big step. It's the first all electric Lamborghini, and I kind of like the way it looks. I like that it doesn't have scoops and angles and things everywhere. Although if you look close, you do still see a lot of Y-shaped body accents, which you're getting that sort of Lamborghini's design language these days, going in that direction. I love the Countach style taillights at the back. I think that looks really slick. But no, I don't think it looks wild. I think it looks comfortably Lamborghini.
Yeah, here's the thing, Seth. You are the only one who's actually seen this in person. So Smith and I are going by photos, and I got to agree with him, and I got to agree with Group of FBC. It doesn't look especially wild, like, undramatic or understated in photos. That's what I think. I got to agree with those guys, but you're the only one who's actually seen it. So maybe we're missing something that you have seen.
No, I mean, listen, we're talking about aesthetics too, right? So we can all just argue ourselves in a circle if we want about whether it's understated or wild. I'm surprised. Actually, it's interesting to hear that feedback, because that is not what I expected from you guys or from the viewers. So it's actually kind of cool to see that. When I saw it on the stand, it took up a lot of air, right? I mean, it really did. It had a big presence. It was larger, like I said, physically larger than I expected it to be. It was surrounded every time you looked at the Lamborghini stand, which was also, in fairness, kind of right near where you walk into the quail too. So it was, they got the good real estate to do this debut as well. They clearly, shelled out some good money to show this car there. But the stand was crowded the entire time. So there was something like it was really buzzy at the time, and people were responding to it really well. The things that you see a little bit more at events like this, but not as much as at sort of old school auto shows. People taking selfies of themselves with the car in the background, people asking other people to film them walking around it and do videos who ostensibly weren't journalists or weren't wearing media badges, right? So there was just a lot of activity there. And maybe that did also played into, subconsciously a little bit to my takeaway of what the car looked like and what it felt like. But it definitely had a ton of energy around it. With the group at the show, and I was pretty blown away, because I expected to think that it was a little kind of garish in real life, and it came together a bit better for me. No, again, giant wheels with kind of the crazy inserts, like super wide, super low. All of that can play very differently in real life than it can in photos, but I was surprised. I want to bring up one thing too, because this was interesting to me, you guys having. I don't think this was the last time that I did a quick interview with Stefan Winkelmann, who's the CEO and president or whatever. I know his title. He's the head dude at Lamborghini again.
Lamborghini.
He made it very clear, and it's been clear in other times that he's spoken to the media, that battery technology has not been in a place where Lamborghini specifically was comfortable building what they would always call a super sports car, right? So in that kind of vernacular, that means Aventador, right? Like that means Gallardo. That means a car, a true like low-sung supercar sports car. But I guess it doesn't mean this. I think the way that we were interpreting that for a long time was that the battery technology wasn't at a stage where it could be lightweight enough to get the performance that you need out of a vehicle that wears the Lamborghini badge. And so this is a really interesting point in time. We obviously know that the Volkswagen Group as a whole is investing crazy amounts of money in electrification. And it just makes me wonder what the backstory is of getting Lamborghini to the point where they are going forward with this kind of vehicle. And it also, in my mind, absolutely characterizes the kind of vehicle that it will be when it finally comes into production form, which is pretty large, pretty heavy, more of an SUV than a car. And it definitely does read as an SUV and not as a car, quote unquote, when you see it in person. So, yeah, it's interesting, and it's an interesting statement from a brand. We kind of knew that it was going to happen, but from a brand that has been very resistant to talking about EVs previous to this. So.
Well, and Group FBC says Winkelmann must be the most impeccably, sharply, stylishly dressed exec in the entire auto industry.
I think he's there.
Does it? Yeah. I mean, it matches up with the car we're seeing here, kind of, doesn't it?
Everybody calls him the man in the tight trousers. Like he is really, really amazingly well dressed all the time. And I don't remember it all and can't do it justice, but at some point we'll try and get him on the podcast or replicate the story. But I know Johnny Lieberman has a very interesting story about asking him where he buys his suits, which I guess is the certain way to piss him off.
Oh my gosh.
Wow. Okay.
At some point we'll get into that.
Yeah, so it took Ted Adam Green 3 times to spell this name of this car right. So I got to give him some credit here. It reminds me of the old school Lamborghini Yamara GT. For anyone out there, I actually pulled up a picture while we were talking just to compare it. I don't think it reminds me of it, but maybe they're in the same family, of being a 2+2 Lamborghini vehicle.
Well, I mean, lift it up a little bit. I think, Seth, you make a good point. Seeing it in person, in photos, we're not getting the same context of size. And I think that's going to have more shock value when you see it and you realize this thing is kind of flipping huge, right? So I think there's definitely something to be said there. Any other touch points on this?
Real quick, group of FBC,
yeah,
Lanzador sounds like a beach resort in the Mediterranean full of noisy DJs and very, very drunk tourists.
Lanzador. With a cruise ship docked offshore somewhere.
Yep.
Lamborghini, they do talk about wanting to be eco-friendly, which I think is a neat. Well, it's a neat touch. They're talking about the wool upholstery.
1 megawatt.
1 megawatt.
Megawatt.
They're talking about the wool upholstery being sourced from Australian sheep. They're talking about recycled nylon used for the thread. They're talking about, and I love this, sustainably tanned leather processed in residual water from olive oil production.
Yep.
Beautiful.
So will that be the case in 5 years? We'll see, but it's a start. 2028.
5 years.
2028,
but that's
to 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 to 7, 28.
We're going to see it.
That's what it'll be in production. 2028 that's what they're saying now. Guys, let's move on to ZDX. I keep wanting to say XZD, and I have no idea why.
Yeah, you're way off there. At least some of your.
I mean, I even have it on my notes, written in huge letters. ZDX. Look, ZDX.
At least I can get on board with your AT4X, AT4. What do you call it?
The Subaru. The Subaru BTDZ Energizer, long lasting. Acura ZDX. It's finally debuted. It's finally here. It's Acura's first EV. It rides on GM's Ultium platform. It's shared with the Blazer EV. We knew that going along. We have the stats here now. It's got a 102 kilowatt hour battery. It's available with a single or dual motor powertrain.
Right. And the dual is for the Type S model, we should say.
Yep. And there will be a Type S model that's going to put out 500 horsepower. The regular version will have 340 horsepower. You can get a range of 325 or 315 miles. The battery can fast charge. You can gain 81 miles in 10 minutes. The Type S, as we said, 500 horsepower, a 288 mile range. But the Type S, this kind of stood out to me too. I mean, they're not just giving it more power, they're giving it active air suspension, so it has adjustable suspension, big 6-piston brakes, 15.6 inch diameter rotors on that. I feel like they want to make the ZDX do more than just kind of zip along in a straight line. I feel like they're at least going to give it a go of, being a fairly sizable electric SUV, still give it the ability to stop pretty well, maybe even bite some corners pretty well. It's just a hair smaller than the MDX, but because of its electric powertrain, it actually has a longer wheelbase. Moving inside, you've got an 11-inch digital screen for the driver, 11.3-inch screen for the center display. Production starts next year. It's supposed to go on sale by the end of the year. We don't have specific pricing yet, but Acura says should start around $60,000, with the Type S starting around $70,000.
Yep. So one thing I will say I really like about this vehicle, first off, is that to me, it is very hard to see the resemblance with the Blazer EV. It's not immediately there. And I feel like kind of going back to a vehicle we were just talking about, the Toyota BZ4X and the Subaru Solterra, they just look so similar that it just kind of takes the wind out of their sails. Whereas to me, I don't feel like someone's going to walk into an Acura dealer and be like, isn't that just a Chevy? I don't get that impression from looking at this. I think that, you know, whatever they did, the designers did, they really tried to differentiate it from a vehicle that's sharing the same platform.
And yet in the process, go ahead, Seth.
I was just going to say, I saw my first Blazer EV on the street a week and a half ago or something. And I haven't been in one or anything like that. And then I saw this, obviously, both at Pebble, debuted to Quail, and then it was at Pebble as well. And they don't look a lot alike. I mean, they look alike insofar as like every sort of mid-sized SUV looks alike these days. And every mid-sized EV SUV is going to look a little bit alike. But beyond that, I was pleasantly surprised. Moreover, I heard multiple people. So there's a guy called John Ikeda, who is head of Acura design. Yeah. Really great dude. He's trouble to be around to have dinner with because he and I both like martinis, so we can get in beat pretty quickly. But I heard a lot of people coming up to John and saying at Pebble, where this car was sitting on the concept lawn with, you know, some truly wild and completely crazy stuff, that this was the best looking thing on the concept lawn. Not at Pebble Beach necessarily, not amongst the cars that were competing, but the new stuff that they had there. And I believe it. I think it looks really sharp. I think they've done a fantastic job differentiating it from the Blazer, from the GM portfolio or the GM designs. And I think that they are going to sell the hell out of this car, to be totally blunt.
I mean, I definitely agree that they've done a good job separating it from the General Motors counterpart. But it's still, I mean, you kind of said it looks like, you know, a mid-sized SUV. And as somebody who just spent a week driving a mid-sized SUV, 1,500 miles, I actually almost walked into the wrong one time when it was parked in a parking lot. I'm not seeing anything I mean, it's not bad. I'm just not seeing anything that makes me say, ooh, I want to get this over anything else. At least in the photos here.
325 miles of range, 400 volt architecture, you know, 500 horsepower, 60 or 70 grand. Those are the things that will sell it. I'm not saying, like, you can hate the way that it looks, like, based on the specs alone and the class that it competes in. I mean, this is kind of going, it's undercutting a little bit, but it's going up against things like Audi's Q80 Tron, and I guess SQ80 Tron, and Tesla Model Y up through Model X, I suppose. It's going to be sort of in the middle of those as well. It is right in the sweet spot. And I think that it's got fantastic specs, and it comes from a brand that, even if people aren't like big Acura buyers, although I think there are a lot of them out there, there's certainly a lot of people who care a hell of a lot about Honda. And this will be the Honda's first EV in a manner of speaking as well. So I just think that this is going to be, it's got a lot of things going for it out of the gate. Not to mention the fact that, you know, we're sort of bagging on a totally different proposition, obviously, but bagging on how long it's going to take Lamborghini to come out. Every time we hear about a new EV and its new concept, we're like, there's that weird dance between like, well, what am I seeing, and when am I actually going to be able to buy one, and will they be available, and all that stuff. There'll be questions about this too, I think, as it comes closer to production and on sale date, but they're here now, right? They're showing a production version now. And I think it's just to me, it's really impressive in ways that matter, even if I thought it was the ugliest thing in the world, and I certainly do not. So
yeah, I mean, it's not ugly, and the stats. I mean, yeah, the stats are right there. I think the stats put it in a pretty good league, but it's just the styling just isn't really doing anything for me. And Now I do rather like the interior. The interior layout seems refreshing. I'm kind of tired of just complete glass cockpits everywhere, and I do rather like just the greenhouse, the way it's laid out. I like that you still have some tactile controls in there, and I guess the price too, $60,000 to start. I mean, what's I'm trying to think off the top of my head here. What like a comparable Mercedes? What the EQE? What I mean, those are a little bit more yet, aren't they?
More. I believe
For
they're a
sure.
hair more. Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
I'm looking.
I feel like we're kind of
Go ahead.
damning this with faint praise, where I do think it's like Seth, you're saying
Yeah.
it's right in the sweet spot of the market, and it's nice to see, you know, we know all of these brands are going to be going electric slowly, but to me what makes this interesting is how much they've differentiated it, because we know it rides on a GM platform, we know that it's going to be sharing some components with that, but they were really able to differentiate it, and I think that to me is kind of where this vehicle deserves credit, is that it's not,
Yeah, but
it doesn't just look like a cookie cutter Blazer.
I mean, it's a skateboard, right? Like they're sharing battery and powertrain components. They're not sharing anything that matters in terms of design. And just to be really clear, like, and I'm not arguing with you, Bruce, but I'm not damning it at all. I think it's, I just say it again. I think that they're going to sell these very, very well. I think it's very well realized. I like the design. I think that the specs for the price are interesting. Now, again, we got to get into like, what is it really going to cost when you're looking at, okay, well, a Type S with all the bells and whistles, it's not actually going to be $70,000. It's going to be more than that. I just looked up because I think it's close. The Q8 e-tron, not the SQ8, starts at 75.6 basically, right? So already, you know, like there's going to be a delta between those. I don't know if Acura is going to be able to undercut Acura or not, but they're going to be pretty close, with Acura being very competitive on price at a minimum. So, and don't forget, like, well, I need to bite my tongue a little bit here, because I'm so used to saying over the last couple of years, anybody who's building an electric SUV is selling every one of them that they can build, but I don't actually think that's true anymore. Like some models are. There have been some issues with some models sitting on lots, so I'll check myself a bit there, but I do think this will do pretty well. So
yeah. So we spent a lot of time on some of our earlier topics, and we really wanted to let Seth talk about something really fun that he did, but we also wanted to talk about your. Go ahead.
We've got time. We've got time.
No. I know. I'm not ending the show. It's just a bummer because I wanted to hear more about Seth's time at Pebble this year, but I also want to hear about him driving some R8s. So
we've got it, and if you haven't seen it yet today, you need to go to motor1.com and check out Seth's article on the Audi R8 last drive review, because you're so used to seeing first drives. Of course, R8 is going away. And Seth has a very unique perspective in that the R8 came about, Seth, just as your career in this crazy business was starting. So why don't you tell us a little bit about just your R8 time and your R8 experience, possibly for the last time on track out at Laguna Seca.
Yeah, I mean, I think that very probably for the last time on track, but right. This was fun to write. Like, it was a cool program, and I like it when it's actually a really neat way for Audi to do this, because automakers do obviously like take it seriously when some of their signature models go out of production or change generation or things like that. But we're at a really perfect point right now in terms of, we're just talking about it. You know, like Volkswagen Group, Audi production of internal combustion cars is going away, right? Like, we can see that happen. We probably know what the date is. I can't remember if they said 2030 or not, but so that we know that they're in a major transition point, and they had this opportunity at the Motorsport Reunion this year at Monterey Car Week to be able to do something significant with R8, which has been, I would argue, either their second or their first most important vehicle ever. Not in terms of production, but in terms of the perception of the brand and perception of what the brand is capable of. in the modern era. Certainly, there are cars that they sold more of. They're race cars like the Audi Quattro and things like that. Like it's an argument. It's not de facto, but I think it's this and the TT that really kind of changed the conversation around Audi about 25 years ago. So we got to go out and drive, the car for a lap and a half, about a little bit more than a lap and a half, behind Tom Christensen, who's won 9 victories at Le Mans, including, I can't remember, 4 or 5 with Audi, which is crazy. That part's cool. It's cool just to be around them, and to see like the enthusiasm of the team and things like that for this vehicle. Driving around Laguna is always fun. When you're doing it in sort of a lead follow scenario, just for a short period of time, it's not, it's cool. I don't want to besmirch that part of it, but you're just kind of like, it's not like you're gaining a lot of information about the vehicle. You're not really evaluating anything. You're just kind of following the line as best you can for a short period of time, and try not to do something silly with the car, right? But the opportunity that Audi gave us by doing this was to look back and say, what is R8 meant to everybody over the last, again, 20 years. Isn't that crazy that it's been 20 years now since that this car has been in production? 2 generations, obviously, and I think there was a facelift in there too. But this still always feels like a modern car, like the sort of car of the future that you can drive today. So yeah, I drove, or I didn't drive. My buddy, who was the editor of Winding Road magazine at the time, Riley Brennan, picked me up in a first gen R8 the first year that they were in production. I think it was probably a couple months after they came into the media fleet in Detroit. He didn't tell me anything about it. He stopped by, said he wanted to take me to lunch, and we went out in this car, and I was just kind of blown away. It was one of those moments where, everybody's had this, where you're sitting in a place or doing a thing, and you're like, wow, this is really happening. Like I've been talking about and trying to break into the industry. I spent a lot of years before that writing about cars and building websites and things of that nature. But when there was something about getting in that car that I've seen in magazines and seen on, sort of like proto version of the internet, that brought it home for me, that something real was actually happening and changing in my life and in my career. So that moment is just one that I'll never forget. I thought that was really special. I can sort of close my eyes and remember what it felt like even today. And then throughout the years, when you have the opportunity, when you're in a position where you're very fortunate to be able to drive a lot of new cars, special cars are special cars, even if you've driven them a lot before. So it was just pretty easy as I was driving around the track and as I was thinking about the R8 to kind of, sit back and think about well, wait, how many times did I actually drive this car? What did I do any first, I did a first drive program of the R8 Spider V10, had multiple loans over the years. And then every time you do that, when you get behind it, it's special, right? So you have a real experience in the car because you feel this kind of weight of expectation to a certain extent to do something interesting with it, where, you have other cars that are interesting, but maybe not that special feeling in your driveway week after week, and you don't feel that same expectation. You don't feel that same kind of pressure to do something interesting and create something cool, some kind of cool content for your viewers or your readers, whatever, with it. And that was never the case with the R8. You always wanted to go out of your way to share it with people, I guess, at the end of the day. So, so it's been very special to me. And the fact that it does kind of mirror the duration of my career to this point, I think is interesting and really fun too.
I love that symmetry. So all the ramblers out there, definitely go to motor1.com, read that article. Seyth is a great writer. Being the awesome boss that he is, and yes, I'm totally kissing up right now. He's a tremendous writer, and we don't get to see quite enough writing from Seyth. So go support the website.
That's fair.
We want to see more from Seyth. We want to see more. Well, actually, we want to see a little bit more right now. Because
you want me to write on command?
Buried in that story in one of those photo galleries is a photo of an Audi R8 Spider next to a red Pontiac Fiero, and that doesn't come from Audi. That comes from Seyth. Seyth, what's the story behind that?
So that Fiero, actually, I'll dig it up if we can't find it now, I'll dig it up and put it in the YouTube notes or something like that. That actually might be my favorite story that I've ever written, and certainly
Really?
Motor One was. Yeah, I wrote a story years back, maybe around this era, 2017 or something like that, about that was my mom's car. It's an '84 Fiero that she bought new when I was a little kid. I was 6 when she bought it. And it was a car of my childhood, right? So I wrote a story on Mother's Day, I believe, in 2017 about the car because she gave it to me. So what ultimately was kind of an ill-fated but incredibly kind gesture. She gave it to me. I finally said that I was ready to have it. The car was kind of falling apart. Chris, you were talking about wrenching on cars. I do not wrench on cars, so I didn't do a lot to put it back together, other than pull out my credit card and make some decisions. But you can see it's got some non-standard wheels. Basically, I wanted to make it a runner and a driver, right? And to really be able to enjoy it. So yeah, anyways, we'll find that. There it is. The link to the story about my mom and the Fiero, I think, was great. What we were doing there was, right around that same time was when I got the loan of this car. And as I was saying, we were trying to make a lot of cool content around it. And so we did a full video review that actually did really well. Like, we wrote up the car on the site. And then I said, well, let's do something totally stupid. And we did this really dumb, funny video that probably would be a TikTok if we did it today, but TikTok didn't exist yet, or we weren't quite on it. Where we pretended to have a drag race between the Corvette and the Fiero just because they're both red, and it's such a ridiculous idea, right? So that was us staging west of Ann Arbor, where I used to take all my photos, staging to get ready to shoot that video. Brought the car out, both cars out. I was there with our good old friends, I believe Jake Holmes and James Bradbury, old video producer, and we did a funny video that is linked in the story. If you guys go read the R8 story, you'll see a link there. Let's not put it up now because it honestly, it got no view. Nobody cared about it. It got like 100. It got like 200 views or something like that. But
we could re-social it.
We had a ton of fun putting that together. So again, like, the point there is that it was really fun to do because because it's a special car, right? And you kind of want to go out of your way to do something fun with it. So.
Was the red on the Fiero as close to the Audi as it looks in these photos? Because it looks like they're the same freaking color.
It was pretty close. I mean, what you can't
awesome.
see there, and you guys will be very familiar with this, is the place on the roof, especially in the hood, where the sun just burned through the clear on that car. So the paint is not in great shape. And actually, my mom just sold that car. Now that you're saying it's kind of sad. My mom, I just found out a few weeks ago that my mom finally sold the car. The good news is she sold it to like a 16-year-old kid who's so excited. Oh, that's my mom. That's Amy. Hi, Amy. That she sold it to like a 16, 17-year-old kid who's so excited that he keeps texting her about the car. And she's like, I'm a little worried about this now because something's going to go wrong.
That's awesome, though. I remember one of the first things. Seth and I go back to Winding Road. I think I showed up, it was 2007 or 2008, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
When I started doing stuff on the side. Yeah, I was Seth's intern for a little while. One of the earliest stories I wrote, we were doing a thing called Keepers. And I wrote about the Fiero. Because I mean, I was into the Fiero, but not like into the Fiero. And I wrote that story. And there was a group of Fiero owners, I think in Wisconsin, that came together. There was a young guy over there that loved the Fiero, but he had, I can't remember if he had cancer or some other sadly terminal disease. And he had a Fiero that he was trying to fix up to give to his sister, I think, before he passed. And this group of Fiero owners came together and did like an overhauling thing where in like, I think it was like over the course of a weekend, they got his car done. And it's to this date, it's one of the most heartwarming car stories I've ever seen. And at that moment, it's like, okay, now I have a legit soft spot for the Fiero. So yeah, very
terrible
cool car.
Love it. I love it with all of my heart.
They look great. They look great.
Actually,
84, okay.
Car to drive.
Once they got past the fire thing, it did a little bit better. But no, great car. Seth, I mean, we've got just a little bit more time here. You were in California for the better part of what, almost a week all total? I mean, what's it like just chilling with all the guys with the very expensive Rolexes at what could be one of the most prestigious car events in the world?
It's so much fun to be there, not because of the rich guys and not, I mean, the cars are amazing. We didn't even talk about the cars at Pebble, and I know that that's like a whole other topic, but I don't know vintage cars super well. And even you can know nothing and you can walk around and see the cars on the lawn at Pebble and your jaw would drop to the grass, right? Like some of them are so amazing. It's almost like they're not real. And the people there, the people watching is amazing too. Because again, you've got millionaires and 100 millionaires and probably a couple billionaires sprinkled into. I saw a guy, this is a quick aside. I saw a guy literally, I think, finish the transaction of buying a newly, like freshly restored Lamborghini Miura on the lawn at Pebble, right? So that's sort of a crazy thing that you don't expect to see. Mostly it's great because, again, going back to the R8 thing, like I've been doing this pushing 20 years now. I know a lot of people in the industry, like journalists, PR people, kind of friends that orbit. And so many of them are there during this week, whether it's at Pebble or at the Quail. It's like a kind of a big high school reunion. You know, it's rare that you get, even when you're going out on drives and stuff and traveling, it's rare that you get to see so many people that you know and really love and have a lot of respect for, all in one spot. So that's why it's, and of course, like there's the work side of it too. There's tons of news and things to take videos and pictures of and stories to write. And that's amazing. But when you're actually there, especially on that Sunday of Pebble, when the launches have kind of gotten done a little bit and the work, the temperature of the work has gone down a little bit, and you're just kind of walking around and maybe having a glass of champagne or a beer or something like that, and seeing old friends, it's like anything else. It's like a reunion. So, no, there was no, I didn't see any bills. I didn't see any cash or trade hands at all on the Miura thing. A group of FBC is saying, please tell me that the Miura transaction involved a briefcase full of unmarked bills. Maybe it did on the back end, or it did like an hour after I saw it, but I just was introduced to a guy who just bought a car. So, or
maybe it's like the casinos, or at least some of the casinos that you go into, where if you notice, there's always like the same person or persons at certain machines right up front that are always hitting the jackpot, and people think, I gotta come in here and give me some of this, right? That's doing the deal right there on the lawn. There's other guys standing back and watching, thinking, well, I gotta go get me a Lamborghini right now. I could do this, right?
I think it's a Venmo.
And I think we have a new commenter here. 230K19. Thanks for joining us. I've had two of them, 85 GT and 87 GT in blue Fieros. Seth, your Fiero love is bringing new people to Rambling About Cars. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening. Guys, what else we got here?
I think that might be our show for tonight. We've talked about all the big debuts. We talked about the fun of Pebble Beach. Seth, is there anything, whether it's your personal social media stuff or stories that you're really excited that we've published or about to publish? Is there anything you want to promote?
I'm going to promote this. I did one other thing that I did at Pebble. Yeah, it's a Porsche. It's a Porsche design. So Porsche Design lent me this Chronograph 1. You guys can see it on the site. Bruce, you wrote this story up, right? This is the watch that goes with the limited 911 ST. And so if you are so inclined, when you buy that very expensive car, you can spend an extra $13,000 or $14,000 and buy that watch too. It's really cool. 13,000. There you go. So it's very cool, and because I was on site, I was able to borrow one of those. So I'm going to do an on-wrist review of that neat watch, which I'm excited about. And then the only other thing I have to plug is, go ahead. Sorry.
Can you give me a quick preview, because I've got its old sibling on right now. So what'd you think?
I think
Smith's getting his phone out because he's bored.
We need to have more. You and I need to have an offline discussion about this, because I think it's really cool. Like, you and I think both have a big appreciation, obviously, for the Chronograph 1, Porsche Design's first watch, I believe. I think it's historically super significant. I think it wears really well, despite the fact that it's a really thick watch. I think yeah. I mean, it comes up.
You're wearing a watch.
Yeah. You're not going to mistake that. The only problem that I have with this is, and it's a little bit funny, because my first impression was there's so much color on the dial that when I brought it out into the sunlight, I was like, wow, this is spectacular. It really does come alive. It looks neat. It's great. The dial is still very busy. On the other hand, that case, right? Usually these are in a PVD coated, a black case.
Austin.
And this one is just bare titanium, which looks a lot like, I know that they've done another version of this and somebody told me about it, but also Zinn does a very similar watch to this in a titanium case. I kind of think that it might be the perfect modern Porsche design Chrono 1 if it had the standard dial with that case, right? So that's sort of what I'm working with right now. But I think it's really cool, very special, and super fun to wear, especially at a car event like Pebble. So.
Very cool. All right. Good preview, Smith. I know. Hey, we talked about model cars a minute. Like,
I was just going to be stupid and show, I got the clock on my phone. I don't have the watches are supremely, seriously, the watches are supremely cool. They look awesome. The engineering is awesome. I've never really picked them up, and maybe I should, because I don't have enough expensive hobbies going on in my life already.
Right.
let's
cars,
just
guitars, models,
refinish a house. Yeah, I've got one project car, and after seeing that 280ZX sell for $231,000 last week at auction, I'm thinking, well, maybe I better go jump on the one that's for sale for $8,900 and get it right now. So
yeah. But anyway, so thanks for promoting that. We'll definitely look forward to that. I look forward to reading that. Smith,
absolutely.
Is there anything you want to promote before we sign off?
Just, you know what? Jump into motor1.com. I know we're getting towards the end of summer. Kids are going to be going back to school. We've got the Detroit, the International Auto Show coming up here in September. We've got IAA Mobility coming up also in September over in Germany. So that's two major auto shows. We're going to be covering that stuff like a hawk. So you'll definitely want to stick with us, motor1.com. We're going to have news going up constantly all the time. And of course, we'll be talking about it here on Rambling About Cars. And you need to check out Seth on Motor One Happy Hour that goes up every Thursday afternoon at 2:30.
Yeah.
Seth and crew, they talk about the cars that they're driving every day. They have some great conversations on there. And Seth, you've got...
And if you guys aren't watching it yet, you should be on Friday mornings at 9:30 a.m. live, just like this podcast. The Inside EVs podcast is awesome. I just want to promote that one because we have a whole new crew there. They're not fully formed yet. We're like Voltron, but we're missing the Blue Lion, I guess, or something. So we are, So starting in September, we're gonna have a fully new crew there. It's awesome. It's really fun, and it's another one that you can get it where you get all your favorite podcasts streaming on audio and on YouTube, both live and after the fact. So check that out. Super happy with it.
Lots of fun to be had on all of these podcasts. Join us everywhere. Motor1.com on Facebook, Motor1.com Twitter, Motor1 on YouTube, and the Inside EVs podcast. Seth, where can people get that?
Same places, guys. I mean, the Inside EVs YouTube channel, you can find it there. We'll promote it on social, and you can go to InsideEVs.com, click on the podcast tab, or look for it at 9:30 Friday mornings. So
pods everywhere.
There's an audio version that goes up as well, right? You guys are on all the same services we are.
Correct. Yes. Yeah, all the same. Wait, what was the one we were joking about before? All the places.
Deezer. We're on Deezer.
And Deezer, and even Deezer, probably. Yes, that one should go up. The audio version should go live right after Friday mornings. Full disclosure, because I have become a member of the production crew. It has not gone up Friday mornings the last 2 mornings, but that's on me, and we're going to solve that. So
Very good. But yeah,
Yep.
with that, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. We appreciate all of you listeners. We love the fact that you come spend time with us because we know there are a million and one other things that you could be doing. So the fact that you decide to spend this time with us, it makes me feel so, so good every week. I love that we're doing the show live now. I love seeing your comments. I like reacting to them. It's fantastic fun. And honestly, it's something I look forward to every week. So thank you, everyone. And with that, we will sign off and we will be back next week for some more rambling.